Hey everyone, still trying to figure out the difference between continuous and discontinuous measurement? Well, I already have a video on continuous measurement, which I'll link here. So this video will be dedicated to breaking down the concepts of discontinuous measurement, what it is, the different kinds, and when it's best to use. So keep watching. Imagine you're taking data on a behavior. You want to know how often the behavior is happening. Now, you could watch them every second, recording every instance of that behavior as it occurs. That's continuous measurement. But let's be honest, that's pretty time consuming and very hard to do, especially if you have other things you need to do at the same time. That's where discontinuous measurement comes in. It's a more practical way to record behavior by observing and recording at specific intervals or time blocks rather than every single moment. It's like taking snapshots or a photo of behavior across time instead of filming a whole movie. There are three types of discontinuous measurement. There's whole interval recording, partial interval recording, and momentary time sampling. First up, we have whole interval recording. Think of it like this. You break down your observation time into equal intervals. If the target behavior happens throughout an entire interval, you mark it as occurring. But the tricky part here is that it has to happen the whole interval. If the behavior stops before that interval is over, then you cannot mark the behavior as occurring. So, for example, let's say you want to see if your cat likes the new brand of wet food you just bought. You set up to monitor their behavior for a total of 2 minutes. You break the time into 30-second intervals, which gives you 4 equal intervals. You closely watch your cat for the first 30 seconds. If they eat continuously for that first 30-second interval, you mark that interval as the behavior is occurring. If they stop eating even for a moment, then you don't. It's kind of an all or nothing kind of thing. Whole interval recording is great for behaviors that are continuous or occur for a sustained period of time, for example, tantruming or crying, but it can slightly underestimate the actual frequency of that behavior. For example, if your cat was eating the food for 29 seconds out of the 30-second interval, you won't be able to count that as an occurrence, even though it happened for majority of the interval. Again, whole interval recording is all or nothing. Next, we have partial interval recording. This one is slightly different. Again, we start by dividing our observation time into intervals. But this time, we just need the behavior to occur at any point during that interval for us to mark it as occurring. Let's say you're babysitting your neighbor's kid. His mom is very concerned that he's using inappropriate language when she's not around. She asks if you can use partial interval recording to track his use of profanity for the 3 hours you're going to be with him. The 3 hours are split into 6 equal 30-minute intervals. If at any point during a 30-minute interval he says a cuss word, whether it's one word, 3 words, or even a whole phrase, you're going to mark that that behavior occurred. Partial interval recording is useful for behaviors that are brief or occur sporadically. However, it can do one of two things. It can, one, overestimate the overall duration of a behavior. So let's say that the kid cussed once each interval, maybe a little baby cuss word, took 1 second to say, but now you look at the data and you see that all 6 intervals are checked off. It looks like he was cursing for 3 hours straight. Partial interval recording can also underestimate the rate of the behavior because multiple instances of a behavior can happen within the same interval, but you're only allowed to count for it one time. So let's say that in the first interval and the fifth interval, between those two intervals, this kid cussed 100 times. However, looking at the data, we can really tell. We can only be able to tell that he at least cussed twice during the entire 3 hour session. Finally, we have momentary time sampling. This method is a little different. We still have our equal intervals, but instead of recording throughout the entire interval, we only record if the behavior is happening at the very end of the interval. Your best friend Sarah is really serious about getting more fit and active, and she asks you to be her accountability partner during her hour-long workouts. She asks you to use momentary time sampling and recording whether she's involved in a movement activity at the end of every 2 minutes. So you set your timer, and when it goes off at the end of the 2 minute interval, you mark if Sarah is working out. If she's not, let's say maybe she's checking her phone, she's getting a sip of water, or just catching her breath, then you don't mark that behavior as happening. Momentary time sampling is great for behaviors that occur frequently or are difficult to track throughout the entire interval. It's also useful in situations where you might not be able to observe continuously, even within that interval time. However, momentary time sampling can either underestimate or overestimate the true frequency of a behavior. Please note that partial interval recording overestimates the total duration or time of the behavior, but underestimates the rate the behavior is happening. With momentary time sampling, the frequency of the behavior could either be underestimated or overestimated, really depending on the specific nature of that behavior. Let's just say that Sarah was working out, but just coincidentally, every time the timer went off, she just so happened to not be engaged in exercise. This may make it look like she's not working out at all. Or the opposite can be true, where she's been taking lots of breaks and just so happens to be working out at the end of the 2 minute interval. As you can see, those two different scenarios can really affect the measurement of that behavior when using momentary time sampling. So there you have it: whole interval recording, partial interval recording, and momentary time sampling. These discontinuous measurement methods are essential for practical behavior analysis. Remember to choose the method that best suits the specific behavior you're trying to measure and the context of your observation. Thanks for tuning in, and I'd love to hear from you. Like, how comfortable are you with continuous and discontinuous measurements? Drop any questions or thoughts in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.